Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about Alliance War yet again, and recently I have been tackling the subject relatively kind of hard, and this is going to be another video, but this video we're going to talk more so about the Alliance War map in general, my personal feelings about it, and how I feel it has changed the Alliance Wars, and unfortunately not for the best in my opinion. And the base idea is previous map we had options to kind of like swap the routes to a degree, but this map we have a lot more choice which path to do in tier 1, which path to do in tier 2. Basically, it doesn't matter if you do tier 1 in tier 1, you can end up being on path 7 in tier 2, so on and so forth. And therefore there's a lot more kind of like customization and options available. But also I personally feel that because of this aspect, the Alliance War map in itself has been kept a lot more bland and well, tasteless, if you will, because of this option that you can freely switch and always find the best path for your specific champions, and you do enter the map already with kind of like a specific problem to tackle. I think the overall kind of like tone of the Alliance War in general has shifted quite a bit more to being a lot flavorless, basically, because it has lost something. I think to a degree the idea of it was good, and on paper it looked interesting, aside from the fact that there's a lot of extra unnecessary tiles to be crossed, therefore you're fairly limited to how many fights you can do while it boosted. That objection put aside, I think there is a bigger issue, and the issue in this case is going to be the good old saying, something's good for everything, it's good for nothing. And this map kind of feels like it was designed to be a universal tool that should fit all the needs, that should fit all the champions, that there is a node for any champion that technically enhances their abilities, but at the same time, none of the nodes, with like few exceptions, literally very few exceptions on the map in general, are very bland. The only kind of like relatively difficult fights in general is path 4 in section 1, where you have the Unstoppables and Aspect of War, the first joint fight where we can see Thekiryu here again with buff toggle Unstoppable, and then you have the buff toggle Unblockable, which can be quite a bit hard as well, combined with limited immunity, and the Safeguard node. For most part, and I haven't done every single path, I think, or maybe I have done every single path at least once, but for most part I hardly remember what was on those lanes, because there's pretty much nothing kind of specific. I do understand the explanation we were given by Kabam that basically the left side of the map is much more demanding on having specific counters, the middle is kind of mixing between having the right counters and being skillful, and the right side should technically be all skill based, which it kind of to a degree fulfills, but also not so much if you put in Aegis Intercept and Aegis Heavy Attack and nodes like that. All that being said, my kind of like point what I'm trying to make is, because this map is so kind of like customizable and it's pretty much made so it can accommodate every champion, and then Kabam tried to add more flavor with these defensive tactics where you kind of like modify your defense yourself. Unfortunately, the bottom end result of it has become that the map is just boring. Honestly, now that I think about it more and more, the previous Alliance War map seemed so much more challenging, just because you had a clear vision of what you're gonna have to do. You knew you're gonna have to make it there. There was no somebody's gonna come and bail me out, because there was only one backup, which yes was there, but at the same point it was, if you use it here it might be needed elsewhere. And there was just a lot more sense of the fact that you as an Alliance member have to pull your own weight. This map currently here, in my opinion, kind of like puts a lot of weight on 2 to 3 people's shoulders, and lets 6 to 7 to 8 people basically kind of like slack off. And changing all the mini bosses towards the top up here, again, they're sorted in an order, and I am speaking here by experience, that pretty much one person takes all of the right side mini bosses, one person typically takes all of the left side mini bosses, one person does the middle one, and then you go for the boss kill. And also effectively, this is also quite important. Typically, you kind of like distribute the workload extremely unproportionally in between your alliance members, because technically, even though if you're not a backup player, you might have as little as 4 fights per war if you're doing lanes. Because let's say if you're doing lane 3, so technically you teleport on section 1 here, you do fight against Ghost, you do fight against Symbiote Supreme, you let somebody else take the middle fight, teleport to the middle here, all alliance, all 10 members gather here, so chances are you're not going to do any of those mini bosses. Then you teleport back to your path 3, you take down Spider-Gwen, you take down Ebony Maw, and that's it, and you're sitting kind of out. So if you're not like toward one of the better fighters in your alliance, quite often you're only going to be doing 4 fights per war, and that kind of seems quite a bit not enough in my opinion. And that in exchange can put many more fights to some other player who might happen to be playing better, and he's going to end up, let's say, if he goes down the middle fighting a Domino, Hyperion, Nick Fury, one of the mini bosses, teleports back up here, so that's already 4 fights, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, let's say. So basically, one person can have up to 11 fights or so, and another person can end up doing 4 fights a war, and that happens quite a lot. And that kind of happens because there's always one person mainly dealing with all of these joint fights on each section. So basically there are 3 people who are heavily overcommitting to the number of fights, and then there is a large group of players who typically do only 4 to 5 fights per war. So I'm not a big fan of that, and overall, definitely after having played on this war map for a while, initially I found it fairly confusing and relatively difficult to understand the idea behind it, and after I did, it definitely seemed like a bland, tasteless product because there was no bite to it. Previous Alliance War map had arguably many more difficult nodes. There was more nodes that said like that required you to be poison immune or bleed immune. There was still the dismay stuff and so on and so forth. So I think honestly, and I might get crucified for this, and again I'm saying this without trying to dig my own grave, and I'm not taking in consideration the global nodes, the modifiers or whatever you can call them. But as the map and as the nodes themselves exist here, outside of 5 nodes that we discussed before, outside of Path 4, Aspect of War, and Buff Toggle Unstoppable, outside of this node, which is node 20, outside of node 37 and 41, so there are 5 nodes that are relatively challenging and difficult. Everything else is just dull and boring, and Alliance War effectively has largely been reduced to fighting the champions, not the nodes and the champions. And especially after experiencing a lot of insane nodes in Act 6. Now going back in Alliance War, it just doesn't seem too engaging, I'll be absolutely honest. So I do think Alliance War map is due for rework. I don't think this map has worked well at all. I understand where they were trying to go with it, but I don't think that they succeeded. Because they kind of tried to make the ultimate map where everything can be customizable, where you can interact to each section anywhere, where all alliance come together for some mini bosses, and there's basically 10 people who can fight each mini boss in the middle, and then toward the end you're all gathering there again. And you can basically jump from any map in section 1 to any path, any path in section 1 to any path in section 2. And all of that, I think, overall, all in all, just has created a bit too much customization, too much choices, too much for us, and I don't think it is working, or at least making it difficult or challenging, much less engaging for players. And I think it's also a part of the reason why Alliance War interest in many people is dwindling, because you can kind of get lost in between all of this choice, where you're going to go, which sections you're going to do. I know many officers are having troubles kind of like delegating the path. It's fairly at the same time difficult and at the same time pointless to do some crazy good alliance or placements, because at the end of the day, outside of like 5 nodes and maybe the 5 mini bosses and the boss, most of the nodes don't even really matter because they hardly get kills in top end alliance wars. And all in all, I'm definitely not interested in this map. I think the previous map was more challenging. I think the previous map was more interesting, and I'm hoping that we can get a rework. This map kind of reminds me of a situation when, say, your girlfriend asks you to buy bread, does not specify, you enter supermarket, and you end up looking at 90 different choices. Whole meat, whole grain, raisins, tiger, sourdough, white, brown, red, sliced, diced, thin sliced, whatever, and French bread, whatever. You have no idea what exactly you're meant to get, but there are all of these options available for you. And it's kind of like similar here to a degree as well, because we have access to more champions than ever before. We can rank up more champions than ever before, and these nodes are bland. they typically, I think I made this kind of like mention before as well in one of my previous videos, but these typically are the nodes when you're doing, like, say, Act 6, that you ignore, because typically in Act 6 there's like one basic node, the main node, that will kind of like bring your attention, let's say biohazard or acid wash or do you bleed or whatever, and then there's a bunch of other fluff and craft like redouble determination or strike back or whatever else that do require you to be aware that they're there, but they are the nodes that do not kind of like pose the main problem for you to solve. So if you have, let's say, biohazard with this node combination, your main thing to keep in mind is that you're gonna need at least a bleed immune champion. The fact that he might gain a little bit more power or power gain rate if you place a lot of debuffs on them, you're not interested. Strike back, okay, you need to know that he will gain power when you drop a special attack, but it's something you can play around easily. Champion boost, stuff like that, like whatever that kind of like is natural. And then you take a look at like a global node is coming, Siphon, obviously, what else? And yeah, so you can't take many block hits. So this all basically reminds you of Act 6 content without the problem part, without the main issues, without the things that made you dislike or made you struggle in Act 6. So not that I'm being sadistic, but I think it's just boring. I think they missed the main kind of like key aspect that you need. There are no bleed or incinerate requirements. There's not like, you know, freezer burn fights or something like that. Like even AQ has harder nodes than AW at this point, I believe. So I'm definitely up for changing the map up. I think, even though it hasn't been that long since we started playing on this map, I really wish they redesigned this piece of crap as soon as possible and we get a chance to try out something new, because this definitely is not interesting anymore. This, I believe, was interesting at the beginning only because it was new, but as soon as people got used to it, it just seemed tasteless, bland, and flavorless, and I don't know what else to call it. It kind of does the job, but at the same point, we are at the point where it doesn't even matter where we place our champions, it matters what champions we place, kind of thing. And I think that's wrong, and I think that is what previous Alliance War map was different from this one. So, all of that being said, I think that will quite do for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Do let me know what you think about Alliance War map as it stands right here. Do you guys like it? And if you do, then still drop a comment and tell me how wrong I am. Either way, that will do for today. And don't forget to hit that sub button, like button, all the buttons, drop a comment, do whatever else you want. To be fair, just do not unsub or dislike. And I'll catch you guys soon. See ya.